Thank you. I switched you. All right, let's do the prayers. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness in the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that hold some close and others distant. I pay homage to the Sublime Mother of the victorious ones of the three times, the inexpressible, inconceivable, and indescribable perfection of wisdom, which is unborn, unceasing, and of the nature of space, and which is the object of realization of the self-knowing primordial wisdom. Okay, great. So there's nothing in the discussion group. So let's go. Last class today. Let's go back to the material. Okay. We got to page 192. No. The end of his argument, the argument about you have to realize emptiness, just realizing the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I is not enough. Before he then refers to Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara, Bodhisattva Charyavatara, or Bodhisattva way of life. Okay, so what does he say? What does Lama Tsongkhapa say? In regard to afflictions not mentioned in the Abhidharma system. Okay, afflictions mentioned in the Abhidharma system. What are the afflictions mentioned in the Abhidharma system? How many Abhidharma systems are there? 2. What are they called? Treasure. You mainly study for the higher Abhidharma? Asangas. Compendium of Abhidharma. Okay, great. So, what are the afflictions that are mentioned in the Abhidharma system?
The lower or the higher?
Both. as if you knew the difference. No, there is no difference. There is no difference. What are the afflictions mentioned in the lower and the higher Abhidharma system?
They're all rooted on the grasping of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self.
Very good. All the afflictions, as Venerable Kumbhena says, all the afflictions that are rooted in a mind that grasps at a self-sufficient, substantially existent I. Okay. Why are not all the afflictions that are rooted in a mind that grasps at intrinsic existence? Right, to afflictions because it's a correct consciousness. According to them, a mind that holds on to intrinsic existence is a correct mind because everything exists intrinsically. Okay, great. So, in regard to afflictions not mentioned in the Abhidharma systems, such as grasping at true existence, this is now Lama Tsongkhapa, that in Chandrakirti's tradition is said to be a form of afflicted ignorance as well as other afflictions defined from this standpoint, consisting both of cognitive and non-cognitive forms. Even their manifest levels cannot be eliminated by the paths described above. Here there is something called cognitive and non-cognitive. Have you ever heard this distinction between afflictions that are cognitive and afflictions that are non-cognitive? What could these be?
The cognitive afflictions are different and they can only be eliminated in the after the third.
No. You're thinking of cognitive obstructions.
Yes, what did you ask?
Afflictions that are of a cognitive nature and afflictions that are not of a cognitive nature. Remember I said before, some people translate the Tibetan word nyumon, or klesha in Sanskrit, they translate it as afflictive emotion.
It already because we have some, how we say, relation to emotions. So if anger is an emotion, also patience is a qualification which is an antidote to anger. So it's not an emotion anymore. But if you have something,
okay, so
like
Doris,
love is also an emotion.
all right, I understand. Love is an emotion, anger is an emotion, attachment is an emotion. I agree.
No, attachment is not an emotion.
Attachment is not an emotion?
No, I wouldn't say. It's a good affliction.
Well, we just had that afflictions. Even if it's a root afflictions, there are afflictions that are more emotional and afflictions that are more cognitive, of a cognitive nature, right? So emotional, what does it even mean emotional? Why is anger an emotion? In what way is it an emotion?
Because it's labeled like this.
What?
It's labeled like this.
No, but that's a circular argument. Why is it called that?
No, why do you call feeling feeling? Why do you call bread bread? Why do you call emotions emotions? It's the same question.
Yeah, but don't call this bread. And I don't call this emotion because it's missing some of the characteristics.
It is creating emotion in your body, like a reaction that is not, like obviously all of them are not objective, but it's like it's creating an emotion that is personal to you.
All right, I like the word emotion because it's got a particular word in there, motion. It kind of moves you, right? Doesn't it? So I think what Zika just said, it does something in your body. It's like, it's more than just a rational kind of mind. It drives you. Emotions drive us, right? So I would argue...
But this is a function. This is not what it is.
Yeah, but the function is one of the characteristics, and based on the characteristics, we say it is this, that, or something else, right? That's how we apply the terminology. So let's look at attachment. It wishes for something. It wants something. What does it want? Attachment to a person. What does that want? More. No separation at the very least, not to be separated. Or more, yeah. And what does anger do? The opposite. Wanting to be less, wanting to be separated, less of that particular object. Of course, it exaggerates the positive and negative aspects, but I don't think the exaggeration is the main problem. I think it's that wanting something. Jealousy, I call jealousy or envy 2 in 1. It's attachment and resentment. It's kind of attachment, wanting something really badly, and then being resentful towards the person who's got it.
But the emotion is desire and not the attachment itself, no?
But you can't separate them. It is, the attachment is a desire. It desires, it's a desire to not be separated from its object.
So the emotion then is desire, not attachment.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's the thing, that the kind of aspect of wanting something. But it's hard to, I don't know whether all afflictive emotions have that aspect of just wanting something really badly. Attachment does, envy does, arrogance. Arrogance is an inflated mind that believes I'm better than everyone else. I'm greater than everyone else and so forth. So that would be called arrogance. Is that kind of, in what way is that an emotion? Anyway, so I believe it's difficult because in the Tibetan you don't have a word for emotions. So you don't have a text saying, oh, this is an emotional state and this is not. But you have something that is called the 5 views and the 5 non-views. Where ignorance is one of them, afflictive doubt is also one of them, and I don't know how they're emotional. So emotional is a little bit difficult. The English word is difficult anyway. But are you familiar with the distinction between the 5 views and the 5 non-views? No? Okay. The 5 views are attached. The 5 non-views are attachment, anger, arrogance, afflictive doubt, and ignorance. So those 5, right? So they are not really seen mainly from the point of view of cognizing something, wrongly cognizing something. For instance, ignorance here is seen as a confused state. It's defined as that which is a confusion. It holds this meaning of confusion. Attachment and anger we just talked about, arrogance too, and then there's envy. And then you have the 5 views. What are the 5 views? The view of the transitory collection, looking at ourselves, I and mine, and perceiving that to exist intrinsically, which is seen as the root of roots. I mean, the view of intrinsic existence or holding on to intrinsic existence is anyway a problem. It's anyway a root. It's the root cause. But I believe, according to the way it's described in the text, the root of all roots is the mind that holds on to the intrinsic existence of I. Why? I said it many times. Why is that more of a problem? Why is holding on to the intrinsic existence of I and mine more of a problem than holding on to the intrinsic existence of others?
Because it's creating our non-virtuous behaviors.
Yeah, but in what way does it create our non-virtuous behavior? So Rika is saying it creates our non-virtuous behavior. But what does it give rise to?
Ignorance and
Self-cherishing. Self-cherishing, the self-centered attitude. What does the mind do? First it perceives an intrinsically existent self. Then that gives rise to a mind that holds on to the I being more precious. I'm more precious. My happiness is more precious. That doesn't happen when I hold on to the intrinsic existence of Venerable Kumbhenla. I hold on to her intrinsic existence, but I don't think she's more precious. Sorry. I am the most precious. I just want to make sure you all understand. I am the most precious person. So therefore, it's when we hold on to the intrinsic existence of I and mine, it gives rise to a mind that believes this I and mine are more important, more precious.
it also gives rise to ignorance, where the 12 links starts.
The 12 links? Yeah, okay. That's okay. It's ignorance, yeah, it's the first link, the ignorance holding on to intrinsic existence, exactly. But then we're not looking at the 12.
So the circle begins with it.
Okay, that's true. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's true, but let's not look at
It's
the...
just another word for the same thing, I and mine.
Well, the thing is, like, ignorance as part of the 12 links is not talking about specifically holding on to I as intrinsically existence or mine, but it's more general saying holding on to intrinsic existence. But in this context, we're talking about the root of all these different misconceptions of intrinsic existence. That is the one that holds on to I. And that is the first of the views. The 5 views. The first view is the view that holds on to the intrinsic existence of I and mine. What's the second? Is it working? Pardon? This is working. This is working, yeah. What is the second view? The extreme view.
Ignorant existence of phenomena.
No, it's not mentioned in there. That's not part of it.
Okay.
What's the second? It's called the extreme, the view of extremes, or the view holding on to extremes. What is that? Holding on to extremes. Either nothing exists or everything exists as permanent. So if we perceive of the I and of other phenomena to exist intrinsically, either they are always existent or they're non-existent. If that were true, so based on our view of intrinsic existence, if, let's take the I, but we can also take other phenomena, if the I were to exist intrinsically, it would mean, if we really take the logic of intrinsic existence, if hypothetically all phenomena existed intrinsically, either they always had to exist or they never exist, which is why we have a natural sense of permanence. Right? The sense that we are permanent. In what way? not in the way that I'm thinking, I'm not I mean, sometimes we think, I'm never changing. We have those thoughts, or this person never changes. But there's another way in which we hold on to the permanence of ourselves and other people. How is that? How's that usually described? A former moment of myself and a later moment of myself, they're one. Which is another way of saying, if I, for instance, don't like someone, I hold a grudge. You're all familiar with that expression, holding a grudge? So it's like, if someone harms me yesterday, I'm still angry today. I can't let go. Because I'm holding on to that person, the person who's harmed me yesterday, I look at that person today and I perceive that to be the same person who harmed me yesterday, right? There's a sense, oh, that's the same guy. But it goes further than that. It even goes as far, is it really hot today? It's kind of hot, right? That was just me.
No? Maybe it's hot for you, but not for me.
I'm not for you, okay.
It's hot. But maybe for
No, don't worry.
somebody
No, it's fine.
Absolute word for hot or not hot. Fire would be very hot. It would be burn us.
Okay. All right. So let's look at what did I just say? Oh, this sense of yesterday's I is the same as today's I. I mean, we even have that when we go to a place and we recognize the place. There's a river there, for instance, and there's the thought, oh, that's the same river. I was here last year. That's exactly the same river. Actually, there's nothing about, I mean, it's much more obvious with the river. It's much more obvious that this can never be the same river. The water that was there last year is long gone, right? Even the shore, the sand, it's all been, you know, if it's like in a bed of sand, like the sand is long gone. Nothing of what was there before. The fish is long gone. It's all gone. So with mountains, same idea. The particles that make up the mountain are long gone. And the same is true for a person. But I asked you many times before, isn't there a sense when you come, no, I usually ask you, the sense of I, the I that you perceive, like the way you look at yourself, think of your own I. Is there a sense that is the same I that came into this room half an hour ago? Right? It feels like it's the same I. So that would mean the I is permanent, which is based on our view of intrinsic existence. Because we hold on to an intrinsic I, therefore that leads to the extreme view that either the sense is permanent or that it goes after death, it goes out of existence. That would be another view. Not that presently we don't exist, but the view when we die, we just get out of existence. Okay, that's the extreme view, the view of the two extremes. Then the third view is, what is the first? Wrong view. The view that certain things that do exist don't exist. So there's no karma, there's no rebirth, there is no liberation, no enlightenment. Then there's the view that holds on to certain disciplines and spiritual practices as supreme. Believing that if you engage in extreme asceticism, right? Extreme asceticism, for instance, fasting for long periods of time, flagellate. In Christianity, you have this practice of flagellation. What else? Animal sacrifices. So that these are practices, spiritual practices. So that's called the view of, I don't know, inferior morality or certain morality and spiritual conduct as supreme. And then there is the view of the supreme, believing that the other views are all supreme. Believing that these other four views are supreme, which is a huge obstacle because we feel like, wow, these are supreme views. Whatever that entails, whatever view it is of the four, oh, these are really good views. They're in accordance with reality. They're sacred views and so forth. So those are what I call the 10 root afflictions. Actually, there's six root afflictions of which the afflictive view is subdivided into those 5. Okay, that's really important. If you want to understand the afflictions, you need to know these 5. But can you see the different quality of these views? The first 5 are more emotional, especially anger and attachment and so forth. They move us much more, whereas the other one are kind of cognitive. They're cognitive of nature. They're described as a distorted intelligence. It's not a correct intelligence that sees things the way they are, in the way they are, but it's a type of intelligence that's called distorted. Okay? Anyway, so these afflictions, Lama Tsongkhapa mentions here those cognitive and those of non-cognitive forms, even their manifest levels cannot be eliminated. So then, to go through the explanation, mental afflictions that fall outside the Abhidharma classifications cannot be prevented from manifesting, even temporarily. So if you realize only core selflessness, then you're able to, so if you are able to realize selflessness, core selflessness, then of course core selflessness, the mind that holds on to a coarse kind of self no longer arises, and neither do the afflictions that are connected to that. They don't arise temporarily, but the other afflictions still arise. So mental afflictions that fall outside the Abhidharma classifications cannot be prevented from manifesting. They still manifest, even temporarily, by a path that directly realizes the course 16 aspects, or particularly the absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So if you just realize that, the other afflictions will still arise. Most importantly, this includes the ignorance that grasps a true or intrinsic existence. So in Acharya Chandrakirti's Prasangika tradition, such a mind itself is an affliction, especially afflicted ignorance, specifically afflicted ignorance. So the mind holding on to intrinsic existence is still an affliction. Because the path under discussion does not realize emptiness in the Prasangika sense, it does not directly oppose this ignorance. As a result, neither the grasping at intrinsic existence nor the other afflictions that principally arise from it, whether they take cognitive forms such as the 5 views, or non-cognitive forms such as emotionally charged afflictions rooted in that grasping, such as the 5 non-views, can be rendered inactive even temporarily by that path. All right, so we heard about this last time. What is such an arhat called? An arhat described in the Abhidharma. An arhat described in the Abhidharma is not actually an arhat, but they may believe they're an arhat. So they eliminated the coarse afflictions in the sense of the grasping at a coarse self and all the afflictions that give rise to it. And they still, they probably also overcome, or probably temporarily don't have coarse anger, because you notice that. Coarse anger you would notice. But it is very clear in the text, they're very clear in saying that this type of arhat may actually believe they became liberated because the coarse afflictions are gone. All right. So, well, in what way are they an arhat described in the Abhidharma tradition, or Abhidharma in the Abhidharma? Well, because they eliminated these types of afflictions. Okay. That said, there's indeed this difference. Although manifest afflictions, Lama Tsongkhapa says, manifest afflictions present on the peak of existence cannot be eliminated by the mundane path that compares rounds in terms of their refinement, that can be eliminated through cultivating familiarity with the realization of the core selflessness of persons as defined above. With these, I've explained clearly, so Lama Tsongkhapa says he has explained clearly a commentary statement on how paths divorced from the realization of suchness that are yet claimed to be antidotes against the afflictions are similar to mundane path that trace the levels of refinement of the realms of existence, and how, like those of non-Buddhists, these paths cannot eliminate all the afflictions. So basically, that's the final passage of this outline, in which Lama Tsongkhapa says there are 2 types of examples of different meditations that can temporarily remove certain afflictions. But one of these methods, one of these kind of meditations that temporarily remove certain afflictions, are practiced by non-Buddhists as well. And then there's the other category that is practiced by Buddhists. Okay, so in this case he says those practiced by Buddhists, so the Buddhist path, are actually a little bit more effective in that they can eliminate more afflictions. The mundane, and here I've repeated this explanation of the mundane absorptions again. Today when I read this, I was like, oh gosh, I said it so many times, I explained it so many times, it gets boring. I should have just left it out. So these mundane absorptions, and I'm not going to read it now, as you know, these mundane absorptions, they are able to eliminate certain types of attachment of these different levels of the form and formless realms, but they cannot eliminate the attachment that belongs to the peak of cyclic existence. However, the mind that realizes core selflessness can eliminate even that temporarily. So in that way, Lama Tsongkhapa argues it's superior. This realization of core selflessness can eliminate certain afflictions that these mundane absorptions, meditative concentrations or absorptions cannot eliminate. Okay, all right. However, nevertheless, so I'm not going to read this because I read it so many times. I repeated it too much. I should have just left it out. Yes, please.
What examples of such afflictions you have when ignorance, grasping, and self-sufficiency?
Examples. Well, first of all, if you realize the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I directly with a yogic direct perception, then what you temporarily eliminate is the mind that perceives the opposite, that perceives such a self. But what does such a self, when you hold on to an intrinsically existent I, a self-sufficient and substantially existent I, it gives rise to attachment, to a particular form of attachment, a particular form of anger, right? So these afflictions are temporarily gone once you realize that particular type of selflessness. Yes, Alan?
Why only temporarily?
Why only temporarily? Why? Well, why only temporarily? By realizing the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I. If you realize that directly, you temporarily eliminate some of the afflictions. It's a powerful mind, right? It's a yogic direct perception. It does realize one of the coarser types of selflessness, so that it does overcome some of these afflictions together. Well, first of all, the mind that perceives the opposite, that holds on to such a self, plus the attachment and the anger that mind specifically gives rise to. But why only temporarily?
It depends a bit on the concentration you have.
Pardon?
When you have a deeper concentration, you have the pass.
Well, because actually,
temporarily.
No, we are not talking about the concentrations here. We're
But
talking.
it's a possibility that you, as long as you're in a deeper concentration, you don't have these afflictions.
Well, but okay, so that's true that in that state you don't have the afflictions when the mind is so focused and concentrated in a direct realization, but there's still something left that gives rise to, yeah, exactly. The seeds are still there. So, therefore, Alan, it's going to come in a moment. So, however, this method, by contrast, the yogic direct perception of the absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, developed through meditative familiarity with that core selflessness of persons, is able to temporarily eliminate some of the afflictions pertaining even to the peak of cyclic existence, even the highest level of the afflictions associated with the highest level of samsara, peak of existence, they can be temporarily removed, which you cannot remove with the meditative absorptions. In this respect, this Buddhist path is more powerful than the mundane absorptions described above. Okay, so this far, I don't think we need to go into this further. Nevertheless, as Acharya Chandrakirti explains in his auto-commentary, so his commentary on entering the middle way, since this yogic direct perception does not realize the absence of intrinsic existence, it can be compared to those mundane paths in that it is unable to eradicate the seeds of any of the afflictions. nor can it even temporarily eliminate the ignorance that grasps at intrinsic existence or the other afflictions that arise principally from it. In this way, the text resolves the objection. Any Buddhist path that lacks the realization of emptiness, as understood in the Prasangika school, though meaningful and effective to a degree, very important. So let's not forget its importance. Let's not forget its effectiveness. It functions in a manner only comparable to a mundane meditative absorption. Despite its effectiveness, it does not eliminate the afflictive obstructions and therefore cannot serve as the decisive antidote leading to liberation. Okay. To better understand the distinction between paths that temporarily eliminate afflictions and those that do so irrevocably, it may be helpful to consider a traditional analogy. There's a traditional analogy, you may have heard of that, of a poisonous tree. Not a nice tree, not an oak or something, a poisonous kind of tree. The afflictions, like attachment, anger, and so forth, they're likened to the branches of that tree. The branches, the leaves, the fruits, possibly. Oh, no, the fruits are like the suffering that they give rise to. So like the branches of the tree. The afflictions such as so one may cut away the branches repeatedly, and for a time, the tree may appear diminished. So that would be like realizing core selflessness. You cut away the branches. Yet as long as its root remains intact, the tree will inevitably grow again and produce poisonous leaves and fruit. Cutting its branches does not eliminate the source of harm. So in a similar way, the mundane path of non-Buddhist practitioners, or non-Buddhist seers, as they're called, Changsong, so that's the rishi in Sanskrit, so seers, and the direct realization of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, they function like trimming those branches. It's like, yeah, it's great. And for the time being, those branches will not in any way harm us, but they grow again. The root of the tree, the fundamental ignorance that grasps at intrinsic existence, remains untouched. It continuously gives rise. It gives rise to those afflictions again. But why? It will be explained in a second analogy. Because this root is not removed, the seeds or latent potentials of the afflictions, they persist. So the seeds are still there. They persist. They're still waiting to ripen. Even if some afflictions may temporarily cease, the underlying basis remains. Consequently, when these meditative states degenerate, it's possible they degenerate, the afflictions arise again, just as branches regrow from a living root. Thus, the mundane path bring about suppression rather than definite eradication. Now, this word suppression is actually a really good term, but it's sometimes misunderstood. Suppression can be misunderstood. And it's true that there are certain suppressive states in that when you suppress something, it rises stronger. I don't think this is what's meant here, that when you suppress it, it arises stronger afterwards. But suppression in the sense, I used another example. That's not an example in the texts, but when I think about suppression, I think about this example. So to clarify this distinction further, by contrast of the supermundane path, realizing ultimate reality, so the wisdom realizing emptiness directly is like uprooting the tree. So once that root is severed, nothing further can grow from it. So we should think of the realization of emptiness, the direct realization, as in severing the root, the mind that severs the root. So that no longer any seeds can arise. I mean, they've all been eliminated. So when this ignorance is destroyed, the afflictions can no longer arise, because with the removal of their root, their seeds are likewise eliminated. So the seeds is really saying the ignorance, that is responsible for the potential. What's happening?
The sound is not so good, honey.
Oh, okay. Should I?
Stop this mic.
I try this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is this better? Can you hear it clearly? Yeah? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, good. Thank you. So, actually, when you say as long as the root ignorance is there, the other afflictions could arise. When we talk about seeds, it sounds kind of weird. Like we may think of physical seeds kind of flying around together with the anger, but really it's just, seed is just another word for potential. As long as the ignorance is there, it can always give rise to the other afflictions. That's another way of saying potential or seed.
There's also something less than a seed, a latency. This is
A latency. A latency. The latency is also left. Yeah, those are different. These are the imprints.
Yes.
Yeah, those are the imprints, exactly. But let's just look at now the way, what to do to become liberated. So to further clarify this distinction, we may also consider the analogy of holding a ball underwater. This is not in the text, but if you think of a ball, like think of something being suppressed. When you hold a ball underwater, when the ball is pressed beneath the surface, it remains submerged only as long as the pressure is applied. So that is like realizing core selflessness. As long as that mind is strong enough, they won't arise. The afflictions won't arise. Or when you think of the meditative absorptions, even better. We study a lot about these meditative absorptions. It's really interesting. We're not supposed to practice them. They become part of your practice, actually. But not in the way they are, not the way we study them. We study them, for instance, as means to be reborn in the higher states. We study in great detail how you're reborn in such a higher state, but we're told not to practice them. But it's still incredibly fascinating because it shows you what the mind can do. And the way you practice them is, of course, to assist the realization of emptiness. Anyway, but what we hear again and again is that these mundane absorptions, if they're not combined with the realization of reality. So in other words, what you're supposed to do is you have the wisdom realizing emptiness, and when you combine it with these absorptions, very, very powerful mind. That's what we're supposed to do. Combine them with the realization of emptiness. But if they're just used on their own, then they're like pushing a ball underneath the surface. Eventually the ball will pop up again, right? Okay, so this is the example here. When a ball is pressed beneath the surface, it remains submerged only so long as the pressure is applied. Only as long as pressure is applied. The upward force is still present. It has not been eliminated, but merely restrained. This can even be compared to just an ordinary meditation on patience. As long as you keep meditating on patience and love every day, you may not become angry. But when you stop doing it, anger will arise again. So it's kind of like, it can be compared to letting go of the pressure that pushes the ball underneath the surface of the water. Similarly, the mundane meditative absorptions and the yogic direct perception of core selflessness temporarily restrain manifest afflictions. As long as the force of these absorptions remains strong, the afflictions do not appear. However, when these states weaken or degenerate their repressive or their suppressive power, However, when these states weaken, so when these states are weakened, these absorptions, for instance, or our daily meditation, when that weakens, meditation on patience, for instance, or their suppressive, or when these states weaken or degenerate their suppressive power. I read this wrongly. When these states weaken or degenerate, then their suppressive power ceases. So just as a ball released beneath the water immediately rises to the surface, the afflictions, they manifest once again. But the direct realization of emptiness does not merely hold the ball beneath the surface, it eliminates the ball itself. So you have to eliminate the ball itself. Just as you have to eliminate the root, here you have to eliminate the ball itself. So the ball represents the root ignorance, while its buoyant force, the force that brings it back to the surface, represents the latent potential, the seeds for the afflictions to arise again. This buoyant force does not exist independently. What does it depend on? This force for the afflictions to arise again, that buoyant force that brings it up to the surface, depends entirely upon the presence of the ball. Okay? So once the ball, that is the root ignorance, is eliminated, that buoyant force necessarily ceases as well. So if the root ignorance is gone, it cannot give rise to attachment and anger and so forth. And I mean, these examples, the ball and the root and all that, may be helpful, but I think even better is if we just think of our self-centered attitude, which is of course rooted in our view of an inherent I. As long as we perceive of an intrinsic I, we consider that I to be more important. And of course, obviously, it gives rise to attachment and anger and so forth. It makes sense, doesn't it? Our anger and attachment is all based on the view of the self existing in an exaggerated way. And that exaggerated way gives rise to an exaggerated emotion. Our afflictive emotions, our anger, attachment, they're all exaggerated versions of ordinary emotions, non-exaggerated emotions, right? I think a good example is love. I've talked about these counter forces. The counter force, I mean, love seems to function very similar to attachment. In fact, we confuse the two all the time. Kind of saying, I love you, but I love you, don't leave me. It's kind of like, well, if it makes you happy to leave me, go. But it's like, I love you means I'm attached to you, basically. I mean, it doesn't always mean that. Let's not generalize here, of course. In the West, what we consider to be love in the West, sometimes it's true love. We want the other person to be happy. We have these moments, there's someone we feel very close to, we want them to be happy and we support their happiness. That would be an example of actual love. But a moment later, if their dream is to take on a job in a different country, we may no longer support them. Next, same city, okay, but different country, different matter, because we're attached to them, we don't want to be without them. So then our love gives way to attachment. And it always gives rise to attachment if somehow the self-interest is threatened. As long as we're invested in a particular way. We talked about this before. Even with love and compassion, with compassion, I gave the example of compassion. We do have a spontaneous reaction when other people suffer. We do usually spontaneously want to help. Right? If someone on the street, like a little child, you can watch it. Like sometimes the tourist comes and there's a little boy, a little girl, and they trip, and you can see how people try to help the child. Usually the parents are quicker, so they pick it up, but you can see how people want to help. When they see some kind of suffering, usually people, when there's a train crash, they sometimes have train crashes, and you hear like it crashed somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and the villagers in the middle of the night, they heard there was a train crash, and they start running and try to help. I think that is an expression of our natural love and compassion. But the moment our own interest is at danger, like, okay, helping someone means I spent so much time and money that I can't spend it for myself, then our compassion is hampered. So it goes as far as, okay, I do it naturally, but the moment we think, oh, but actually I'm busy, or, oh, well, this is actually really expensive, and, I won't be able to buy this, that, and the other if I spend it on others, that's when our compassion is stopped. It's very obvious that I and mine, our exaggerated sense of I and mine, keeps us from compassion and love. But these two are still similar, in particular love and compassion. No, love and attachment, quite similar. But attachment is an extreme, an exaggerated version of love. And so are all the other afflictions. You have counterparts that are healthy. I don't think a healthy sense of competitiveness is a problem, right? Another person is doing really well. I'm saying a healthy sense. A healthy sense. I'm not talking about envy. So you see someone else working really hard and you're inspired, right? In the sense, oh, if they do it, I can do it as well. I want to do the same thing. And you're happy they're doing it. And you're doing it in a measured sense, not like trying to be them or emulate them. No, just looking at them and it inspires you. You're feeling, oh, I want to do the same thing. Otherwise, wanting to become a Buddha is envy or competitiveness. I mean, we talk about 3 types of faith. You remember 3 types of faith. One is believing faith. Believing in what, for instance, the Buddha has said. The second is joyful faith. Sometimes also described as pure faith. It's like being overjoyed by the qualities of a Buddha. Seeing, for instance, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I mean, honestly, have you watched people? Usually we watch His Holiness when His Holiness comes. But have you ever watched people when His Holiness walks past? Right? They can look as grumpy as it gets and as depressed as it gets. When His Holiness comes, right? Everyone is so happy. I mean, I'm exaggerating. I'm not making fun of it. I mean, that smile. But usually when I translate for His Holiness, we're somewhere else now. When we translate at Hayari, which is, somewhere else. So the camera, we don't see His Holiness directly, but we see it on the screen. So then sometimes the camera person doesn't keep the camera on His Holiness, but keeps it on the people. And you see their incredible happiness. They're so happy they see His Holiness. You can always tell where His Holiness is walking past. You know, people's talking, chit-chatting, and then His Holiness comes on, and then they continue doing what they were doing. So the thing is, therefore, that's what's called joyous faith. Joy is generated. But then the next step is faith that's called aspirational faith. So based on believing what they teach you, based on how they inspire you, how they affect your mind in this joyful way, you want to become like them. That's not competitiveness. That is just wanting to be like them, understanding you can be like that. You probably wouldn't want to become like that unless you had met them. So that would be a healthy type of, I don't even want to say competitiveness, but then competitiveness, yes, it has that connotation of comparing yourself to them. But you could still am I like His Holiness? Oh no, not yet. Okay, that kind of sounds a little weird. It's like, wow, I'm so far away from it. But no, you could compare and say, oh, my love and compassion have become better, have become greater. Or I don't become angry so quickly. So you can compare it. You have someone to compare it to. But then if that becomes influenced by the self, then it becomes obsessive. And in the end, you don't want to be His Holiness so great. You want yourself to be great. That would be envy. Oh, that's such an absurd idea, to be envious of someone who's so beyond you. It's not even mentioned in the text that anyone is... Well, yes, it is mentioned in the text. Yes, that one of the cousins of the Buddha was actually jealous of the Buddha, was envious of the Buddha. Yeah, it is actually mentioned. He tried to harm the Buddha. Oh my God, how absurd. But what it also says in the text, that Devadatta did not see the Buddha for who he was. You can actually not be angry with the Buddha if you perceive a Buddha. If you perceive the Buddha as just an ordinary person, you can become angry with them. But if you actually perceive them for what they are, it's impossible to be angry with them. Isn't that fascinating? You cannot be angry with the Buddha. You can only believe they're ordinary and then get angry with them. But of course, there are people who see His Holiness as ordinary and possibly get angry with him. Okay, anyway, having said all this, so therefore, every emotion has a counterpart that is actually rooted in reality. Even anger. Even anger. Seeing a situation as negative and doing something about it. I mean, like even the lamas, they can be very stern. they're not always like smiley. And I told you these different stories, right? One story only about His Holiness, where he was very strict with someone for their own benefit. But then, of course, if the I is involved, it becomes an extreme emotion, it turns into anger. Okay, so I'm only saying that to show the correlation between that root misconception and our emotional states, our other afflictions. Anyway, having said all this, okay, so the example of the ball, I hope that's clear. I think I've read through everything. So once the ball is gone, then all the other afflictions are gone as well. So the afflictions, they do not merely remain dormant, they are now totally gone, can never arise again. And that is the state we want to reach. Okay. Now, this is also true. This is also what Shantideva, or Acharya Chandrakirti, the great Bodhisattva Shantideva, the great Bodhisattva Shantideva. In Tibetan, you always say the great Bodhisattva Shantideva. But as you noticed, at some point, it sounded really odd in English to say again, great Bodhisattva, so I call him Acharya. According to Geshe Dorje Damdu's, of course, based on his inspiration, which is so beautiful, the way he said, yes, he said he's not a classmate. These masters are not our classmates. We should not just refer to them by their first name, Chandrakirti and so forth. Yeah. That's why I started saying, instead of Asanga, Arya Asanga, Arya Nagarjuna. He's so right. I mean, we have that much time to add these titles. And in Tibetan, you always do. You always do. Lama Tsongkhapa, Je Tsongkhapa, yeah. Anyway, so here we're talking about the great Bodhisattva Shantideva. So as Lama Tsongkhapa says, this is also the standpoint of Guide to the Bodhisattva Way, which is the standpoint maintained by the great Bodhisattva Shantideva. Also, Geshe Thupten Jinpa, he doesn't always use this because his translation is basically for a Western audience, and we're just not used to it. When I worked with the Emory students, they had to write papers, and the most absurd things happened when they wrote papers. When they quoted His Holiness, this is too embarrassing to say, they did it the way they do it in modern academics. So the first time they would say His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Afterwards they would say Gyatso says. And I was like, you can't say that, And then, I was working with other people there, and they were like, yes, you can say that. That is academics, that's modern academics. So some did actually say His Holiness the Dalai Lama or His Holiness, but others would say Gyatso. I mean, who calls His Holiness? Okay, in the Long Life Prayer, they say Avalokiteshvara Dense Gyatso, but they say Avalokiteshvara Dense Gyatso, so that's different. But it's kind of weird. That's why I used to not do it, but now I follow Geshe Dorje Damdu's inspiration. As mentioned above, Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of the middle way draws primarily on the insights of three great Nalanda masters. Very important. These are very important in this text. In Acharya Chandrakirti's text, three Nalanda masters are particularly important: Acharya Buddhapalita, Acharya Chandrakirti, and the great Bodhisattva Shantideva. Of course, Acharya Chandrakirti, of course, obviously, but even the other two, Acharya Buddhapalita and the great Bodhisattva Shantideva. He describes them as the three great charioteers of the Prasangika tradition, which is likened to a chariot that carries practitioners to liberation and awakening. Acharya Buddhapalita is regarded as its initiator. If you may remember, initiator, why? Because he initiated the Prasangika system. He was not the pioneer. There's this word in Tibetan, Shingdesoje. He's the Shingdesoje, which kind of means he initiated that tradition of the charioteer. So in the sense, like when you create a path in the jungle, right? That's like a charioteer, right? I don't know do you use that word like that? Do you use charioteers like, it's more like a pine, like a charioteer is like creating a path, right? The English word.
It's a kind of ancient word, isn't it?
It's an ancient word, right? Well, Tibetan is pretty an ancient word. So.
It conjures up ancient Greece and Troy and
Right.
chariot.
Oh, the chariot, yeah. But a charioteer, what is a
The charioteer is the person driving the chariot.
drive? Yeah. So it has the same idea as Tibetan Shingda. It has the same idea, Shingda, as in like a chariot. But it also connotes here when we say Shingda Soji, so it means like you create a new tradition. Like when there's no path through a jungle, for instance, and you drive through it with a chariot, you know, you do it once, you do it twice, and you create a path. So similarly here, using that analogy, when we talk about the different philosophical systems, in particular the Prasangika system, actually in India, while the Buddha was around and shortly afterwards, the Prasangika tradition didn't exist the way it exists now. I mean, you had all the teachings by the Buddha on the Prasangika tenets, the Prasangika, the highest philosophical school, but people weren't aware of that. So you needed someone to kind of filter out that system, to make it clearer, to be able to apply this term. These are Prasangika tenets, and these are other tenets. That didn't exist first. Now, even with Buddhapalita, he was kind of the initiator. He talked about Prasangika, yes, but he's only considered the initiator, not the actual pioneer or the actual, what did I call it here? Trailblazer. Oh, that's the word. That's even better.
Yeah.
The trailblazer. Yeah, so here the charioteer is like the trailblazer is the one that actually blazes a trail, creates a trail, right? But the charioteers, they're the ones, you know, like your trailblazer just taking the road once, kind of driving into the jungle once, and that's it. But there's no clear path yet. Now, the trailblazer is the one that creates a really clear path. In what way? In that it distinguishes, this is the path, this is what's next to the path, right? Now, taking that to a philosophical level, this is Prasangika, this is Chittamatra, this is Svatantrika. Now, to really understand Prasangika well, you have to distinguish clearly between this tenet and the other tenets. Makes sense, doesn't it? If you want to know exactly, you need to see what is left and right. There's nothing beyond Prasangika, but there are other systems that sound very similar. I mean, they talk about impermanence, they talk about all contaminated phenomena and the nature of suffering. They talk about all this. Seems very similar. However, when it comes to intrinsic existence or the lack thereof, it's important to understand, what does the Svatantrika say about that? What do they deny? Do they reject enough, too much, or whatever? And that's what Acharya Chandrakirti did. So Acharya Buddhapalita kind of introduced it a little bit, but then Acharya Chandrakirti came along and he very clearly delineated the Prasangika school, saying, okay, Chittamatra says this, Svatantrika says this, compare it with this view, Arya Nagarjuna's view, so that it became very clear, this is Prasangika. And he's therefore given the name, the trailblazer of the Prasangika school. He's given that title. Acharya Buddhapalita didn't get that. He only became the initiator, Shingda Sodu. And then you had Shantideva. He's called the upholder. So in order to make sure that it doesn't become overgrown, you know, you have a path, but if you don't lose it for long, if you don't use it for a long time, it will grow together again. So similarly here, the tradition has to be preserved. It needs to be upheld. And it was upheld by many great masters, but one in particular here is the great Bodhisattva Shantideva. Now, the question that arises when you debate, for instance, when you debate this, is why these three? Okay, I get Buddhapalita. He was, you know, very instrumental in his text. In which text did he compose? Acharya Buddhapalita. What text? He's called Buddhapalita. I'm pretty sure I had a different title, and I sometimes say, yes, the treatise on the middle way, but there's so many treatises on the middle way, you get confused. So maybe he just called his text Treatise on the Middle Way, but because there are other texts called by this, given this name, same name, others have called this text Buddhapalita. I don't think he himself called this text Buddhapalita, but others called it that. So that's the text Buddhapalita. And this text, he initiated basically the Prasangika school. Acharya Chandrakirti, what text did he compose that made him a trailblazer? This one here. Yeah, the entering the middle way, exactly. Madhyamika Avatara. Shantideva? Bodhisattva's way, right? The Bodhisattva, Guide to the Bodhisattva Way. Yeah, mainly that one. 9th chapter, yes. So, but why mention them? There are other upholders. The great upholders of this tradition. Lama Tsongkhapa, definitely one of them. But of the Indian great masters, there's so many that upheld it. I mean, we may not know their names. But why in particular Shantideva? Acharya Shantideva, the great Bodhisattva Shantideva? Well, according to some contemporary scholars, they say that because they say Acharya Lama Tsongkhapa mentions those three specifically because he relies in his explanations specifically on these three. That's the explanation given. It's also somewhere in the text in the beginning. Okay. Anyway, so now let's look at the Guide of the Bodhisattva Way. In which the same position as Acharya Chandrakirti is reflected in his writing. Okay, I will run out of material, but I'll just continue. I realize that I might run out, but never mind. Okay, what does this Guide to the Bodhisattva Way say? In verse 40 of the 9th chapter. So if you're familiar with the Bodhisattva Way of Life, or I keep calling it that, it's actually here called the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way. He says in verse 40 of the 9th chapter, it's through seeing the truth one is freed. What need there is then to see emptiness? That same old argument. So the questioner here is arguing, Lama Tsongkhapa is quoting this, so the questioner is arguing, one becomes free from the afflictions through the path, seeing the Four Noble Truths and their 16 characteristics such as impermanence. Therefore, it is not necessary to see emptiness in order to eliminate the afflictions. I said to you before, that view was very prevalent in India. I mean, actually, because we're so familiar with the Tibetan tradition. So the Tibetans never talked about that. In the Tibetan tradition, that was never a question. And we don't realize how huge that was. But in India, for more than 1,000 years, there was that opposition to this view. I mean, in Tibet, you didn't have the Theravada tradition that would, for instance, claim the teachings of the Buddha were not taught by the Buddha. So in that way, that opposition didn't exist, luckily, which was good. I mean, it didn't exist. But nevertheless, it's always reflected in the Tibetan writing, because of course it was very powerful in Tibet, in India. So first, the view that, first of all, the Mahayana or the universal vehicle wasn't taught by the Buddha. That view was very strong. And secondly, you don't need emptiness to become liberated. You only have to realize core selflessness. Yes. So Acharya Shantideva addressed it. Okay. Now, Lama Tsongkhapa, having said what I just read, and now an explanation follows. So Acharya Shantideva begins by presenting an objection found in the 9th chapter of the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way. That reflects the position of the non-Prasangika schools. So all the other schools, basically. Namely, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Svatantrika. In the first two lines of verse 40, it's through seeing the truth one is freed, that what need is there then to see emptiness. They claim that liberation is attained through seeing or directly realizing. Sometimes the word seeing, sometimes it's used like you see things, the way we use it in everyday language. But when it's used in the context of emptiness, for instance, see means to directly realize. Obviously, from the path of seeing, right? There it's obvious when you talk about the path of seeing, that seeing means directly realizing. The Four Noble Truths and their 16 aspects as explained in the Abhidharma tradition. From the perspective of the Prasangika school, however, these 16 aspects are understood in a coarse way. Again, it's kind of repeating. I'm repeating it again. You heard it so many times. But this is now based on Acharya Shantideva. The selflessness referred to in that context does not denote actual, that is subtle selflessness. In the Prasangika school, they don't even say that is selflessness. They say it's merely coarse selflessness. Selflessness actually refers to the absence of intrinsic existence, but it merely refers to the absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I, or coarse selflessness. All right, so that's the objection. Then, in response to that, Lama Tsongkhapa says, responding to such an objection, Shantideva writes, for the scriptures state that without this path there's no awakening. Shantideva states here, this is still Lama Tsongkhapa speaking, Shantideva states here that without this path of seeing, the emptiness of intrinsic existence, there's no attaining any of the three types of enlightenment. How this is stated in the scriptures is explained by the great commentary on Guide to the Bodhisattva Way, which cites the mother, which mother is here another word for Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, that speak of how there is no liberation for those who perceive real entities, and how from stream entry true Pratyeka Buddhahood, that's a new word, Pratyeka Buddhahood, I've never heard this word, of past, present and future, all of these states are attained through the perfection of wisdom alone. So taking the word awakening in the second line in the above quote, as some do, to refer only to the unexcelled awakening of a Buddha, it's not the meaning. Then the 4 lines beginning, since the true monk is the root of the Dharma, also present how a path that involves a mind infected by objectification through grasping at true existence cannot lead to attainment of nirvana. Okay, so this far, that's what Lama Tsongkhapa says, and now follows an explanation of exactly this passage. Okay, now Acharya Shantideva answers the objection that was given above in 2 ways, by relying on scripture and by relying on reasoning. Okay, so that's usually in the texts you rely on both, on reasoning but also on scripture. Here, scripture is cited first. Usually, ideally, you cite reasoning first and then scripture, but it doesn't matter in this context. In the last 2 lines of verse 40, it says, for the scriptures state that without this path there's no awakening. He addresses it on the basis of scripture, stating that the Buddhist teachings clearly affirm that without this path, the path realizing emptiness, there is no awakening. Okay, so the path referred to here is the path that directly realizes the emptiness of intrinsic existence, and the scriptures are to be understood primarily as the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So this is the main body in the Nalanda tradition. The main teachings of the Buddha, the main body of teachings, are said to be the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. There's so many other sutras, and they're also equally precious and so forth, but they're not considered, they're not given the same kind of importance, in the sense that, well, definitely they describe emptiness in great detail. Okay, of course there are other texts as well, but actually if you look at the tradition study, especially in the Gelug tradition, it always revolves around the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, directly or indirectly, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. All right, so the point is made explicit in the detailed commentary on the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way. You probably never heard about that. I can't even say it in Sanskrit. Bodhicayavatara Panjika. That's by Acharya Prajnacaramati. Again, not someone we have Sherab Nilotra. So he was an Indian man, an Indian master. He lived around, you can see it in the footnote, around the 9th, 10th century, so 950, between 950 and 1030. And he's said to have direct visions of Manjushri, so that was pretty special, as Lama Tsongkhapa also had direct visions of Manjushri, which were regarded as a sign of his profound wisdom. But he was also one of the 6 gatekeepers. Have you ever heard of the gatekeepers of the monasteries? Yes, okay. So not of Nalanda. sometimes even if someone comes from Vikramasila, as he did, who else came from Vikramasila? Dipankara Atisha. They're said to be Nalanda masters, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were living at Nalanda University. Nalanda masters means that was the kind of tradition. It of course originated in Nalanda, but I would say even before Nalanda, because there's some theory, for instance, they don't really know exactly when Nalanda came into being, but for instance, Arya Nagarjuna, the historic account of Nalanda, I think it's a little after Arya Nagarjuna. Maybe there was a small community that lived together, but even for what are called the Nalanda masters to be Nalanda masters, I don't think it's necessary for them to have lived there, because it turned into a whole tradition. And the Tibetan Buddhism, a lot of people in the West don't realize that. I heard it so many times that I thought every Westerner knows. Well, at least those who are familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, that Tibetan Buddhism is not an invention by the Tibetans. It is 100% based on the Nalanda tradition. I attended some conference or some kind of event last year at Tibet House in Frankfurt, in Germany. And we all had to give like a presentation. There were a few of us, and there's one German monk. He emphasized so much the Nalanda tradition, that the Tibetan tradition is based on the Nalanda tradition. I was like, why is he saying that? Everyone knows that. I kept wondering, right? Like in my mind, like they all know that. And then someone afterwards raised their hand, and I said, I'm so glad he said that. I didn't know. And I was like, oh my gosh, needs to be stressed more. People don't realize. A lot of people, I know that previously, when people really didn't understand Tibetan Buddhism, before Tibet lost her freedom, people describe Tibetan Buddhism as Lamaism. What an absurd term. And once I remember I went to a conference in Ladakh. One of my teachers asked me to go there, and I had to also present something. And there was an Indian scholar, and he kept calling it Lamaism. I was like, well, now you're still calling it Lamaism? Yeah, but anyway, so it's not Lamaism, it's the Nalanda tradition, it's proper Buddhism. Of course, where does the word Lamaism come from?
Guru.
But when you refuge, you put the Lama in front of.
Well, also the tantric tradition, where of course the Lama is a representation of the Buddha, but the Lama is not just some kind of monk, ordinary monk. It's this amazing being who's a representation of the Buddha. So really and then saying Lamaism instead of Buddhism, it's kind of like Lama means the Buddha, so why not we call it Buddhism right from the beginning? Anyway, those days are over, but still apparently a lot of people don't realize that it's totally based on the Nalanda tradition. Very, very important. So now this monk, he taught me I have to pay more, I have to stress it more. So anyway, never mind. But despite all these different masters being Nalanda masters, including Prajnacaramati, he still was not a monk there. Apparently, he was at Vikramasila. I don't know whether he got his education in Nalanda and only moved later, or maybe he had his education at Vikramasila. That was also a great Buddhist monastic university in what is now present-day Bihar. Meaning that he examined and debated prospective students at the gate. So if you wanted to enter that place, you couldn't just be like a, illiterate kind of guy who wanted to. I mean, maybe there were ways you could enter, but I don't know. But apparently you had to have certain kind of knowledge, education before, and you were tested at the gate. So gatekeeper sounds like a night watch or something. But no, it's gatekeeper. They were not like just some kind of, god, not at all. Instead, gatekeepers in the sense they were incredible scholars. They were really highly advanced in their understanding. And so they examined and debated prospective students to uphold the university's intellectual standards. So if you wanted to enter, that's what you went through. So he was one of the gatekeepers. Vikramasila itself was a major center of Buddhist learning, founded to preserve rigorous Buddhist scholarship, and it produced eminent figures such as Dipankara Atisha. Acharya Prashna Karamati is especially known for his authoritative commentary on the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way. So if you want to read a commentary, a good commentary, it just hasn't been translated into English yet, as far as I know. Oh no, it has. No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't, sorry. It has been translated to Tibetan, but not into English. So he is especially known for this incredible commentary, which survives in Sanskrit and was translated into Tibetan by whom? By the great Lotsawa Mapa, right? Amazing. He translated that. The principal spiritual teacher of the great yogi Milarepa. In Tibetan also, you never say just Milarepa. Well, usually you don't. The great yogi Milarepa, right? Do you say that in Tibetan? Nenjo Chumbo. Yes, right? Nenjo Chumbo, yeah. Yeah, so usually, so again, I try to do the same in English. The great yogi Milarepa. And Dhammatakpa was another translator, I don't know, and later revised by someone called Yönten Gyatso. Yönten Gyatso, it says. Okay. Anyway, so that's this great commentary. And this great commentary made this point very explicit that Acharya Shantideva, he first talked about, he cited the scriptures first. Yes, so of this Indian... Okay, great, it's back. Okay, good, yeah. For those of you listening online, don't worry, I took a break, so... Oh, thank you. Oh, it's still kind of full. I should better. Thank you. All right, okay, so the term awakening. Yeah, back on. The term awakening, we think it always refers to Buddhahood, but actually, I mean, even liberation, isn't that a type of awakening? What does awakening mean? What is awakening? It's actually the Sanskrit term. In Sanskrit, the word for Buddha, for instance, is awakening. Right? I've once heard this, I'm not sure it's true, but you know how there are many similarities in the English language to some of the Sanskrit terms? Are you aware of that? The great similarities? What is an example? The word Buddha? Okay, well, this we just took over, right? But other words, some people say bud, flower bud, B-U-D. It's kind of like saying that when you have a flower bud, you have everything you need for the flower inside, right? You just have this skin that keeps the flower from basically blooming. That has its origin in bud, in the syllable bud. Other words is the word cow. In Sanskrit, the word gao means cow. And it means to go everywhere. Go. Like it's a part of the Pramanavartika text. There it talks about words such as gao. Gao means cow. And look how similar it's in English. Gao, cow. Go. Cows traditionally in India and still now walk around everywhere. They would just let them, they didn't have, well, I don't know, in the West it was like that as well, didn't it? Wasn't it? I mean, would you just leave your cows walk? I mean, I don't know. Never, ever? Yeah. Did they always have fences? In the old days, they'd just let them roam around, right? I know in like places in Tibet, like sheep and goats, they just let them roam, right? I know from my Ladakhi friend that when she was younger, she grew up in Zanskar, and they had those sheep and goats. They just went up in the mountains. So similar, I guess, in the olden days in India, and as I said, still today, the cow just goes. But the point is that you see there's a lot of similarity when it comes to terminology. So bud, and so forth. And awakening means to awaken from what? The sleep of? Ignorance. The sleep of ignorance. Ignorance is compared to being asleep, not knowing what's going on. And so liberation is a type of awakening. You get rid of ignorance in the first place, not be imprints, but ignorance itself. So it should be called liberation. Sorry, not liberation, awakening actually. And so it is. That's why in Tibetan it's sometimes called the Great Awakening, Changchub Chenpo, Or they say, like they use the word complete awakening. Yeah. Anyway, so here in verse 40, it should not be understood as referring only to the unsurpassed awakening of a Buddha. Rather, as Acharya Prajnaparamati clarifies, it encompasses all three types of enlightenment. The liberation of a hearer and a solitary realizer, and the complete enlightenment of a Buddha. The various attainments of hearers of the past, present, and future, such as stream entry, as well as the stages. So stream entry means when you enter the path of seeing, basically. So as well as the stages of solitary realizers, including becoming an arhat, and the realizations of bodhisattvas culminating in Buddhahood, therefore arise only through the perfection of wisdom, which here refers to the realization of emptiness. Usually, perfection of wisdom, as the footnote shows, doesn't refer to any realization of emptiness. Usually it refers to the realization of emptiness in the continuum of a bodhisattva or Buddha. But in certain contexts, as becomes obvious here from the context, it can refer to the realization of emptiness in general. Yes. Now, in verse 44, Acharya Shantideva answers the objection by relying on reasoning. Okay, here applies reasoning. The verse reads, "Since the true monk is the root of the Dharma, it would even be difficult to be such a monk. It's hard for minds enmeshed in thoughts to pass beyond the bonds of suffering." The true monk, the true Gelong, actually, it's the Densa Gelong. It's the root of the, what is that? What does that refer to, this Densa Gelong, this root of the Dharma? The true monk refers to what is also described as the ultimate monk. In this context, ultimate monks are fully ordained Hira Arhats who serve as the root of the Dharma, as their efforts prevent the decline of the Buddhist teachings and enable them to flourish. So consider to be really important. Who are these great Arhats? They include, for example, the 7 successors of the Buddha. There were the 7 successors. Dömbedera Dun. So the 7, I don't know what they are in Sanskrit. I only know the Tibetan term. I looked it up, but I couldn't find the Sanskrit equivalent. So Dömbedera Dun. Mahakashyapa, Ananda, Sanavashika, Upagupta, Ditika, I'm not sure I'm saying it correctly, Krishna, and Mahasudarshana. Mahakashyapa you've all heard of, right? Mahakashyapa. Okay. So as Buddha Shakyamuni was about to pass into parinirvana, he entrusted the teachings to Mahakashyapa. Now this is from the point of view of the Theravada, actually. It's said that but these are the foundational teachings. So from the point of view of the foundational teachings, they were entrusted to them. Then there's, of course, the great bodhisattvas like Avalokiteshvara, who are not Avalokiteshvara, the Buddhist deity. No. Avalokiteshvara, the great bodhisattva, who was a disciple of the Buddha. Manjushri, Vajapani, those are mentioned. But here in particular, the true monk refers to those who preserve the foundational part of the teachings. And this is really interesting, and this is where we got to the end of the material I prepared, but never mind. Why am I mentioning this? Because I think it's really interesting, and it comes in the next section. I already wrote about it, but I can talk about it a little bit, and I was going to add a footnote. There's a beautiful story of Ananda. You may have heard the story. So when you see these masters here, Mahakashyapa, Ananda, and so forth, these great arhats, they were very important for the preservation of the teachings because they convened these councils. Have you heard of the councils? So what happened was, while the Buddha was around, no one wrote down the teachings. Well, maybe some did, but in general, they were not written down. It only happened after the Buddha passed away, which seems to be a problem because obviously there were no recording devices at that time. But you had these incredible masters who had what is nowadays called photographic memory. Now there's another word. There's a better word for photographic memory, but I always forget. It's not photographic memory, because photographic is more visual. But like memory, it's not photographic. Yeah, if you want to look it up, but never mind. Yeah, Tom, maybe if you want to. It's like when you remember every word that has been said. idiomatic or something. I forget now what it's called. Anyway, so this kind of memory where you never forget what someone has said. There are some people who have this naturally, but I think that's very rare. It's probably karmically conditioned, but through very advanced state of concentration, you can actually develop that ability of not forgetting anything. I mean, we can infer that this is possible if you're really focused on what someone says, you remember a moment later. Well, when you're really distracted and someone says something, you forget right away. Yeah, so take this a notch deeper, like you're able to focus for 4 hours. Obviously, you can remember everything. Now we can focus for 4 seconds and we can remember a whole sentence. If you can do this for many, many hours, you can remember whole teachings of the Buddha. So Ananda, who was Ananda? He was a relative of the Buddha, his nephew, as far as I remember, and he served the Buddha. He was around the Buddha for 25 years. And he had photographic memory, this type of memory that enabled him to remember everything the Buddha taught. But he was not yet qualified to participate in these councils because he wasn't an arhat yet. Because he still had afflictions. If you still have afflictions, you're not able, even if you remember everything the Buddha taught, your afflictions will distort your account of what the Buddha taught. So he had to become an arhat first. And so Mahakasyapa, he didn't become an arhat. I mean, he was really highly evolved. He was on the path of seeing, path of stream, and was on the level of stream entry. But some say he didn't have time to meditate as much because he served the Buddha. But he received most of the Buddha's teachings, at least on the foundational vehicle, and even, well, definitely also on the universal vehicle. So they said, the story goes that Mahakasyapa needed to generate great wariness of samsara, renunciation. So what he did was, in public, he rebuked him. He embarrassed him in front of all these great masters. And he had a special place. He was Ananda, come on. He was the attendant to the Buddha. Of course, everyone admired him. He was greatly respected. But in this case, they needed to get his renunciation working. So Mahakasyapa rebuked him, embarrassed him in front of everyone. And he rebuked him for different reasons. Now, one reason you won't like. He said, you acted in a way that was not okay. One way, you had the responsibility to ask the Buddha to remain longer. Because the Buddha had said on some occasions, I can remain with you for eons. And then just before his death, they said Ananda should have requested the Buddha to live longer, and he failed to do so. So he therefore rebuked him for this failure. That was the first one. How dare you? And I'm just saying it like this, but it was like openly in front of everyone, embarrassed him. How dare? The Buddha is gone because of you. So this is huge. Apparently, there was also a time when he stitched the Buddha's robes and there was no one to hold the Buddha's robes, so he stepped on it and he rebuked him for that. How can you step on the robes of the Buddha? Okay, now that's like a minor thing. Then there was one thing that the Buddha has said about the Vinaya, that there are a lot of minor rules in the Vinaya that we can ignore. The Buddha said that, but he forgot to ask the Buddha which rules those are. That's pretty huge, right? Okay, which ones can you ignore? We say, okay, those that are not practical at this day and age, but maybe there are other ones as well, so who knows? And then number 4, and you really won't like. Does anyone know number 4? He rebuked Ananda for allowing the nuns. Because the Buddha, when the Buddha first refused the nuns, and that's what I want to discuss, because it shouldn't be misunderstood. This is not some misogynist kind of, no, not at all. No, the thing is this, and we need to really take it with a grain of salt. The Buddha himself refused the nuns first. The nuns had to, so the stepmother of the Buddha, his own mother had passed away, which is very common. Even nowadays, when great lamas are born, oftentimes their mothers don't survive that long. So Kapchen Rinpoche's mother passed away shortly after his death, and so did the Buddha's mother. And the Buddha was raised by the sister of the Buddha. No, the sister of his mother. So she raised him, and when the Buddha had become enlightened, she wanted to become a nun. His son also became a monk, and his stepmother wanted to become a nun. So she asked the Buddha, and the Buddha said no first. And they asked him 3 times, and Ananda asked on their behalf, and then the Buddha gave in, and the Buddha agreed that the nuns could join the order. Now, first of all, this is seen as misogynism sometimes. That's totally wrong. That is totally wrong. And the way I look at it, the way I understand it, based on what I read and so forth, it's very important to understand the culture in India at the time. From what I learned is that before the Buddha came, many hundreds of years before, women had a lot of rights in India. A lot of, they were equal to men. There was a time in India. But then what's called Brahmanism took over, and women lost that position. So a woman has only a position as a daughter, as the wife of their husband, and as a mother, or as a sister, but not in her own right. And so the Buddha was actually one of the greatest feminists ever. Why? It seems like nothing compared today. But women never lived alone at that time. They could not live alone. And even to this day, this is true. In many traditional groups, many different communities in India, if you get married, you leave your home and you cannot go back. Even when you're divorced, you cannot go back. Even when your husband dies, you cannot go back. You cannot go back. That's it. You lose your home. You can get desperate, and if the family is really traditional, they will not allow you to go back. That was just the tradition then. So women, first of all, always lived with other women, always lived somewhere. So they were part of a family they grew up in, and then they were passed on to another family, and now they were part of that family. There was no tradition of women leaving their home and becoming renunciates. Only men did that. To this day. I mean, now things have slightly changed. Sometimes I see like even women like sadhus, but it's rare. Very rare. Therefore, if a nun were to leave her home and then decided to go back, she'd become destitute. For monks, that was that option. If they become monks and they gave back their vows, they could go back home. They could. But women couldn't. So I think, given in that particular context, the Buddha basically didn't right away allow women to join, because he was saying, are you sure? Are you 100% sure? If he had allowed it right away, maybe their determination wasn't strong enough. So I say, are you certain? Basically, in other words, he wanted to make sure these women are so determined that they don't at some point give back their vows, which they could do, and then return to what? Being destitute. So I think that makes a lot of sense. It has to be put in that context. For men, it was easier. Secondly, he was one of the greatest feminists because there were no communities of women just living together. Like I said, women lived in their families. They didn't have little clubs called monastic, I mean, I'm exaggerating, it's not a club, but, like little small living communities with women, only women living together, right? So it made perfect sense that he was the greatest, I mean, really one of the greatest. But we look at this nowadays and look, a big deal. There's so many women organizations, but now, not in the past. These women living independently, they had women abbesses, their abbesses, everything was done by women. Incredible. Nowhere else did this exist at the time, right? Historically.
We have a go.
I'll come to that. So this is why, this is important because I've finished the material. But this is important because, but this is important to understand because people misunderstand when they hear the Buddha refused nuns. They come to the conclusion the Buddha was a misogynist. That's one reason. I'm trying to establish that he wasn't. But with Ananda, the thing is, there's something else, that the Buddhist teachings degenerate earlier when they're nuns. Okay, that sounds like a second point. Whoa. Okay. I don't think Mahakashapa had a problem with the nuns at all. I think he just needed to find a reason. And that was reflected in what some people thought. But how could that be? How could it be that Buddhism degenerates earlier if they're nuns? It makes perfect sense. But let me give you one cue. If there had only been nuns, no monks, and the monks had wanted to join the order, it would have been the same. So either way, if you have only nuns, the teachings remain longer. If you have only monks, the teachings remain longer. It was not about women. It was, of course, it was a society where men were dominant, of course, or the monks community. But if it had been the other way around, the teachings would decline earlier. Oh gosh, I had a hard time when I first learned about that. I had such a hard time. I was like, why? But my teachers explained it to me and it makes perfect sense. Does anyone know?
Broke their vows.
Pardon?
It's a break their vows.
They break their vows. Well, yeah. Yeah, Kumbin remembers I talked about this before. You see, well, first of all, the Vinaya has become more complicated because of that. The Vinaya has become much more complicated because now you have two communities living side to side and you have to make more rules, obviously. And for women, of course, there are more rules, etc. Because at the time of the Buddha, you could not walk alone as a nun. You were supposed to walk with another nun because it was too dangerous. There was more forest than there was anything else. But the point is that they degenerate. The reason that I've been given is that because these communities, first of all, live in parallel, and a lot of things are done together. Sojung, for instance, so there's certain rituals that you do together, for instance, and it's just normal psychology. People are attracted to people living a similar lifestyle. I mean, monks and nuns have same aspirations, same lifestyle, same clothing, you know, it's kind of like there's more of a danger of attraction.
But homosexuality was not possible, no?
Homosexuality existed, but it was much rarer. Much rarer, right? Of course it existed as well. And I remember Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Khepchen Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when he was approached by a man who wanted to become a monk but admitted to be a homosexual, Lama Zopa Rinpoche said no, very clearly, no. Because for him it's very difficult. I mean, how can he? The whole point is you live in an environment where there is no attraction. And where if you're homosexual, very difficult. So I'm not saying that there are not monks who are homosexual, but strictly speaking, the point is that you are celibate, and you keep away. So anyway, joining a monastic community is difficult. So the whole point is with monks and nuns together, the likelihood that nuns disrobe with monks and monks disrobe with nuns at that time was greater. I don't know nowadays. I mean, you know, it's like you can spread out further. There are other means to keep a distance. I haven't heard, I only know of one Western monk and nun who disrobed together, actually, but there may be more. It was very, it's in Tibet, it was terrible, right? Monks and nuns disrobing together. So in terms of the society, it was really bad if two disrobed together. And even in the West, in the West, we look differently, but we would definitely laugh about it, you know, it's like. But the point is, what I'm trying to say is, I thought this was a good opportunity to clarify these 2 points. Number one, the Buddha refuting nuns' ordination first. And number two, saying that the teachings degenerate earlier. It's got nothing to do with misogynism. So, Buddhism is actually a very feminist religion. It's totally feminine. It's all about feminism. It really is. But it comes in a culture, of course, with a culture that isn't that feminist. Things are changing, have changed a lot. But of course, the culture is still a different one. And let's be in no denial, the West is by far equal. I mean, women don't have equal rights in the West. No. They earn a lot less. They usually earn less, doing the same job. It's not equal. But Buddhism itself, I believe, is really... So some people are put off by Buddhist ideas because they think it is misogynist. It isn't at all. And the great lamas are the greatest feminists. Those lamas I've met who I believe are highly realized, never ever did I feel discriminated against. I keep saying His Holiness is the greatest feminist. I mean, look what he's done for women. Geshe-ma, 20 years ago, it wasn't even a word that anyone used. And now it's like as if Geshe-ma's always existed. Yeah. So anyway. So for a realized being, feminism or misogyn, I mean, whichever you want to call it, Anyway, sorry. I went on for a long time. I didn't want to go into these details. Alan is right to point it out. But since I don't have much more material, and this was an opportunity to talk about this. Okay, any questions?
So did Ananda become?
Oh, Ananda. Sorry, I forgot that part. Yes, so Ananda was rebuked for those 4 reasons, and he generated great renunciation. He meditated the whole evening, and he became an arhat the next day. So he was ready. That's how the story goes. It was very quick. The end is very easy. So these 4 reasons they gave, and he became an arhat the next day. I mean, it's not that difficult to become an arhat, apparently. And he was already that highly... I mean, they do talk about at the time of the Buddha, some became arhats in a really short time because their minds were so mature. And this is, I don't think it's a fairy tale. I think he really became an arhat the next day. So he was already highly advanced and there was not much left, but then he was ready to use his expertise and be very instrumental in the first council. All right, questions?
Is this why we do all the long life pujas, that no one is rebuking Ananda again, so that no one asks His Holiness to live longer?
What did you say about the long life pujas?
Like now we do long life pujas, and I was wondering if this is because of the story of Ananda, that now we request His Holiness regularly that he doesn't pass away.
Okay, so Rika's question is that why we're doing long life pujas? Because we learned from the mistake of Ananda. We request His Holiness. Yeah, possible. I mean, yeah, definitely. It's very important to request the Lama again and again. And honestly, I kept thinking, Mahakashyapa, why didn't you request the Buddha? No, but the point is not that. The point is not that. Let's not misunderstand. Mahakashyapa was himself highly realized, but he needed to find something to embarrass Ananda to such a degree that he developed strong renunciation and did what he did. Yeah. And maybe this is just a story, but it's part of the teachings. It's considered important. Yeah.
Well, Ananda had a lot of merits. He was the servant of Buddha.
He had a lot of merit. He was the servant of the Buddha, absolutely, yeah. But not enough to then be liberated, yeah.
He didn't take the time to sit because he was caring for Buddha. So,
yeah. Okay. Anyway, yes, Tome.
So I have a question about how things exist. A bit relating to what we talked about last time. Like you talked about from a Pasanka view, it's also quite hard to think about it, not only from a Chittamatra view. Like, I think you gave an example of someone not seeing colors, seeing the world in
black and white. Yeah.
White. Let's say, like today we know that the world has color, like it's true. But I don't know, an apple is red, for example, and not gray. But if there would be like one person who lives in a world that everyone has this mutation of mind, which doesn't see.
So is that a wrong consciousness or not?
Wrong consciousness or not? So
Yeah.
I don't know, like how exactly you solve this from a Pasanka view.
Very, very difficult. Okay, I repeat what Tome just said. Last time we had this discussion, first in relation to the Chittamatra school, I think it was Rika's question saying, if everything is just in the nature of the mind and it appears because of imprints in the mind, how do we distinguish between a correct consciousness and a wrong consciousness? And so in response to that, I said, well, yeah, that's really difficult. But how do you distinguish in the Prasangika school, which is also difficult? And I gave the example of the liquid, like a bowl of liquid. A Preta being sees pus and blood, a celestial being sees nectar, and a human being sees water. Are they all wrong? Are they all right? Or is one of them mistaken and the other one isn't? So usually the consensus is they're all right. They're all correct. The Preta being sees pus and blood because in the Preta realm, beings in the Preta realm, that's what they perceive. Okay, so this far we can accept. But what about in day-to-day life? If I cannot see colors and you can see colors due to a mutation, maybe a certain gene is missing, I don't know what the exact reason is, I suppose it's something you're born with, am I having a wrong consciousness? And the answer is yes. But if half of the population had that gene, half of the population sees color and the rest sees black and white, is half of the population having a wrong consciousness and the other one doesn't? And let's take it to the third extreme. Only one person, me, I can see color, and everyone else suffers from the same mutation, seeing black and white. Am I the only one having a wrong consciousness and all of you have a right consciousness?
His Holiness says the amount of people doesn't decide if it's wrong or wrong.
His Holiness says the amount of people doesn't determine. So what determines it then? If the amount of people don't determine it, I mean...
How much qualities we can see in an object. If we see colors, we can distinguish much more things than if we just see in black and white.
All right, so if we see more colors, but if I now saw the same as an eagle, if I was born with some kind of mutation, or I could hear the same as a dog, you know, like the dog, they say they can hear 10,000 times more than a human, or smell 10,000 times more than a human. Okay, so if I had that, would that not be a wrong consciousness? Would all of you be wrong in that moment because I can see more? You know, ordinary humans, suddenly all of your ear consciousnesses or nose consciousnesses would be wrong consciousnesses because only mine would be right because I see more.
I would say it's just different. It depends a bit on your form body, or on the form or formless body or desire body.
So how do you determine whether someone is mistaken or not then? Right? How do you determine whether someone is mistaken or not? Doris is right. It depends on your body. But we do say conventionally that someone is mistaken and someone is not. Either the texts are wrong to say that, but of course that couldn't be the case because we still talk about perceiving a self when it doesn't exist. But how about sense perceptions? Well, this one, yes. Pardon?
Like 2 moons, right?
Huh?
Like if someone sees 2 moons in the sky.
2 moons in the sky, that's an example because there's 1 moon.
Everyone sees 2 moons.
Okay.
And one person sees 1 moon.
Yes.
Who's correct?
Yeah, who's correct? But let me take another example that's really mean, a mean example of a Buddha. A Buddha is said to experience a disgusting taste as blissful. So what would be a disgusting taste? Vomit, I guess. I heard, sorry, this is so disgusting, I know. But I heard the worst smell for us, the worst smell, apparently scientists like talking about what is the worst smell. For us, most difficult to bear, it's not poo, it's vomit. Vomit is the worst kind of smell. It makes us probably vomit ourselves, I don't know. So a Buddha, if we were to smell or taste vomit, I'm sorry. But it says, there's like a saying in Tibetan, disgusting taste becomes delicious. So a Buddha, if the Buddha tastes vomit or poo, it turns into something very blissful. So the Buddha has a wrong consciousness? What is it? Is it blissful or is it disgusting? Right?
But that's not conventional anymore, what the Buddha does now.
Is it not conventional anymore? The Buddha exists conventionally. The Buddha experiences conventional phenomena. I mean, it goes as far. Actually, I used to ask my teacher about that. I said, how is it possible the Buddha experiences? Isn't that wrong?
He has no
And-
likes and no dislikes.
Yeah, but not just that. Not just that, an arhat doesn't have likes and dislikes, and an arhat wouldn't experience every taste as blissful. So the thing is, my teachers, one of my teachers, he used to say that the taste actually, after it touches the Buddha's mouth, has turned around, has turned into blissful. So if someone else were to taste it. But I don't know. That's what my teacher used to say. But even just...
That would mean that his mind is changing the taste to something what he likes.
So the Buddha's mind has changed. Okay, so this takes us exactly into that direction, that our mind determines how we see things. Right? That's the Prasangika view as well. It's not the mind-only view, but the fact that we see water, whereas a celestial being sees nectar, has to do with the mind we have now. That mind is dependent on a human body. But that makes conventions very difficult. And still, you see, often conventions are described when you don't start analyzing, without analyzing in great detail. If you analyze too much, then conventions become difficult, right? The moment you start analyzing, for instance, saying we all see a wall. We all see a wall. Without analyzing, we can say conventionally, except me, well, I see that wall, you see this wall. You see this wall right behind me. Conventionally, we can all say you see a wall. Okay? You agree? But if you start analyzing what each and every one of you sees, you all see something different. You all actually see something totally different. I mean, what appears to one of you as, I don't know, yellow, appears to others white, but you all call it yellow. So first of all, we don't know whether you have the same perception of colors, whether we all see the same thing. We don't know. But simply from the perspective of where you sit, it's different. Right? So in that moment, how can we say we all see the same thing? If you analyze, you can't say that. Only from the point of view of mere appearances, we can say, yes, we all see the white wall. We can say from the point of view of what is known in society. If everyone else sees one moon, and then, I mean, with the moon, it's pretty easy. I mean, we can establish that there's only one moon, right? But there are other things where it's quite difficult to say. For instance, like a blue snow mountain. They give an example. A blue snow mountain doesn't exist.
But also a snow mountain doesn't exist.
No, a snow mountain exists, but a blue snow mountain doesn't exist. A blue snow mountain. So we would say a snow mountain conventionally exists, but a blue snow mountain doesn't exist. But if I dig a little further, well, the snow appears white only because of the light. It's a specific light. If it's sunlight, I say it's a white snow mountain. I see a white snow mountain. But if our sun didn't emit this yellowish white light, if it emitted blue light, right? If the sun were blue, then a white snow mountain would be a non-existent, and a blue snow mountain. So when we analyze further, why is there no blue snow mountain? It's got to do with the light, right? Who determines it's white? It's only determined by a particular type of light. And again, it becomes very difficult. So you see, conventionality is based on not analyzing further. To give you the last example that I've given you many times, take the seed and the sprout. As the seed becomes a sprout, I take photographs. Every second, I put up all these photographs and I ask you, when is it a seed, when is it a sprout?
There's an agreement, and there must be a big change in the quality.
There's an agreement, but we don't all agree. Some would say photograph number 10,000 is the last moment of the seed, and picture 10,001 is the first moment of the sprout. Some would say something different.
There must also be a change in the quality, that there is an agreement for this, that this is a
There's definitely
So there must be a change in the quality, right?
there's definitely a change. So we would all agree that picture number 1 is still a seed, and then the last picture is a sprout. Absolutely. There's also something from the side of the object, having little leaves, having this and having that. But when you look closer, as in like looking at each picture, the closer the two come together. So the moment, if you take the pictures when it's clearly a seed and clearly a sprout, and all the pictures in between, it becomes harder and harder to say when do you have a seed and when you have a sprout. Again, you're looking too close. Therefore, conventional truth require us to not analyze. The more we analyze, the harder it gets.
But some analysis we
So
can
should
do.
we stop
Pardon?
studying?
Like conventional analysis we can do.
With conventional realities, we can do.
We can do conventional analysis, like check if is there 2 moons or 1 moon. This is not going into.
That's true.
ultimate
There's certain, it's true. Certain things like, is there 1 moon or 2 moons? That's true. We can do that. In certain aspects, it's clear.
Maybe there are 3 moons for a cyclone.
Maybe there's a moon somewhere else.
analysis.
But yeah.
What you said about colors.
Pardon?
So 50, let's say 50-50, 50%, 50%. So who is right and who is wrong?
In what, with
With
respect?
black colors and black
The
and white.
color. I think ordinarily as a convention, we see colors. So just roughly speaking, we can say if you see colors, you have a correct consciousness. If you don't see color, you have a wrong consciousness. You see, in our society. But if next week, suddenly our sense faculties change and everyone sees black and white, I'll give you a different answer.
But you still see colors.
Pardon?
You still see colors.
I still see colors. Yeah, if I still see colors then and you don't,
Is the consciousness seeing a red apple now wrong?
is it still seeing a red apple? Yes.
Is it now wrong?
Now it would be wrong. Now it would be wrong.
But I see a yellow apple.
So conventional truth changes.
Pardon? Yeah, so you see, conventions, it's very difficult. It's not a truth. It's not a truth, first of all, but that's for a different reason. But conventions anyway, they're not that clear cut. The moment you start looking closer, things become, why is this a table? Conventionally, it's a table. I ask you to define a table. And the moment you do, define a table. There are lots of phenomena that will fit your definition. Having 4 legs and a surface, well, then I'm a table. Well, I could squat like that, like my arms and my legs, and then I make a flat back, and you can put things on top of me, then I become or chair becomes a table. Try to define exactly what a table is. It seems so clear, but you can't. Conventionally, it's a table, but for someone else, it's something very different. So conventions are only rough estimates. Actually, aren't they? They're kind of rough estimates. Not in all cases. We talk about permanent and impermanent. Yes, there's some things that are where it's clearer, but in general, saying something is long or short, right? It's long, a long object. Well, only in relation to something shorter. So we can say conventionally is long. I've got a long pen because most pens are short. But in relation to an even longer pen, it's short.
So what was the answer to Thomas' question?
The answer to Thomas' question was that
It's relative truth.
in terms of relative truth, well, as long as you don't analyze too much, well, then we can say, in the case if suddenly everyone becomes colorblind, let's say there's a condition or something. It always depends on the circumstances. You can never say it by itself. But let's say there was some kind of nuclear attack and you were all outside and I just happened to be in the, the only way in which you were affected that you no longer see colors and I still see colors. Then I would say you all have a wrong consciousness and I don't. Right? Because there was some condition that we would call a counter or like a destructive force or something that robbed you of a particular ability. So based on that, I would say I'm seeing it right and the other see it wrong.
Isn't the wrong consciousness
Yes.
apprehending a non-existent.
Yes, but what makes it a non-existent? That's the next question.
That doesn't exist.
Well, it doesn't exist. But what makes it non-existent? You see, what makes a blue snow mountain? What makes a blue snow mountain? I'll ask you back, Alan. What makes a blue snow mountain non-existent?
There are, I don't remember the rules for deciding whether things are existing or non-existent.
You don't need to follow the rules. Your own rule.
My own rule?
Yeah.
Well, I've never seen one.
Because you've never seen one.
I've never seen a blue
But if the light is, you know, like in winter, if
no,
snow sometimes appears as bluish, right? When the light is kind of a little dimmer. Or when you wear, very good, when you wear like sunglasses, like shades, blue shades. Yeah, when you wear blue shades and you look at a white snow mountain.
Yeah, it becomes blue, but that's because of the shades.
Well, because of the shade.
Blue, does it?
Yeah, but if it's a different light, you say it's white, right? But only in a specific light. Only in a specific light. So because that light,
Right, then there's no snow.
there's no snow. There's no light, there's no snow. When you close your eyes, there's no snow. Okay, now this goes into a different. So when there's no light, there's no snow. So in the dark, there's nothing. Your body doesn't exist in the dark, right?
All our normal experiences, everything we perceive and everything, they're all conventions, yeah?
Yeah, there you go.
So they're all mistaken.
It's in relation to,
So they're mistaken, huh?
in relation to what we call the normal. For instance, what is the normal? When you look at a snow mountain, in the middle of the night, you sleep. You don't look at snow mountains. So if we would sleep during the day and we would only be up at night, the snow would probably take on a different color altogether. But it's in dependence on how we live our lives, in dependence on how we usually see snow. Based on that, we say conventionally snow is white. But if you dig deeper, ooh.
There's also the aspect of that our conventional mind is actually engaging in the meaning generality and not the actual object. So it gets to the object, but
So you're talking about conceptual minds and meaning generalities. Yeah, that's different.
reality that appears.
Right, you're talking about like the conceptual mind, and there's a representation of the object you perceive called the meaning generality appearing. It's not the actual object, that's mistaken. But going back to, so I said in some cases it's more clear cut than in other cases. But in the case of snow, for instance, or I was just thinking of another example, I forgot just now. As you
It doesn't really matter what color the snow you see the snow as, they would all be mistaken, wouldn't they?
Well, it's all conventions in the end. It all comes down to convention. So what doesn't exist is mere by way of convention. It's merely by way of convention.
Well, like a monkey doesn't exist on your table right now.
Well, maybe someone sees a monkey. Maybe there's a monkey from a different realm that sits on my table.
But you know, the absence of the monkey on the table is ultimate.
You see, that's why I used to say, I used to say Donald Trump is not on my table, because people in the past were like, well, how do you know there's not a monkey that, from a different realm? And I was like, okay. In the end, so I said Donald Trump. Donald Trump means a particular person, and he's not invisible. So, anyway, so we can go on forever about this, but the point is, yes, being existent and non-existent. Oh, I remember now what I wanted to say. Actually, about this blue snow mountain, is a blue snow mountain white? Is the snow mountain white? We can't even say that, because from the point of view of modern physics, there are no colors out there. From the point of view of modern physics, colors are just different light waves, basically, or different, I don't know, I forget how it's called, light waves, right? Is it light waves? Different lengths of wavelength, or different wavelengths. So,
the color of the snow is changing with the light.
yes,
It can be different in any moment.
exactly. And still we would say one is right and one is wrong. And in terms of modern physics, I mean, it becomes really difficult, right? Going back to that, you don't even have to argue, Tom, about Prasangika. From a physics point of view, are we all mistaken or not?
Yes.
Is our eye consciousness totally mistaken? Is our ear consciousness mistaken?
I think not.
Pardon? No, you wouldn't say it's because of conventions. Because how we perceive things, even though in actuality don't exist that way, so therefore we can say, yes, snow is white, and even if physicists say it's not, doesn't matter.
Physics also say it's white.
Pardon?
I think physics also would say it's white or an apple is red. It's just that these molecules have a capacity to emit this.
Yeah, but when we say white, we believe the whiteness is on the object. We believe it's got nothing to do with our eyes, and that's wrong, right? So physicists have to talk to us in some way, but in a way, a physicist, if there were a physicist who would no longer perceive, let's say there's this miraculous physicist who would no longer see blue and so forth, they would still say blue because otherwise we don't understand, right? So this is what the Buddha doesn't perceive what we perceive, but the Buddha talks according to what we perceive. Based on what we perceive, the Buddha talks about it. And that makes the Buddha so effective. Anyway, this went on for a long time. Anyway, it's okay for a last class. It's okay for
You
good.
wanted to mention
Yes, we'll continue next term. Will be on the 15th of September. We'll start. I looked it up. It's a Tuesday, so that works really well. It's still a little bit monsoon time, but the other option would be to start later, and we did that last year, and it was so cold in November, and it became dark really early, and people have a hard time coming. So it's kind of like, what is that? Balancing between something and a hard place or something, isn't that the saying? Yeah, anyway, it's both have their advantages. Pardon?
Devil and the deep blue sea.
Oh, the devil and the deep blue sea, yeah, whatever. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. So I have to start a little bit in the monsoon time, but I'll finish a little earlier when it's not that cold. Yeah, so that's the plan. So 10th of November will be the last.
10th of November.
Yeah, I think I looked it up. That'll be a Saturday, and I thought I looked it up. It's November 10th. That's 8 weeks. Yeah. That's the plan for now. So, yeah, things could still change, but I'm pretty sure we can start then. All right. So, thank you very much for everything. Oh, I also want to take the opportunity. There were so many people helping. Well, of course, Leon was incredible, has been the whole time, for years actually. He's done the technical aspects. So today again he came, although he has his own studies actually going, but he's been helping out amazingly, Tinley or Leon. There's of course Thea from Italy, working together with Leon. Well, they do different things, but working on the website. On technical things, she uploads the classes and so forth. So both of them, amazing job. Then, of course, Dunya and Sina, both also here in class. Sina posting with the classes, helping out with the technical stuff. Dunya, of course, also the technical stuff, the amazing tea. So, if the two of them are not here, I wouldn't know what to do. And then, of course, Venerable Yangdun, she also prepared the announcements. She's a designer. She unfortunately has a huge problem with her bag, so she can no longer come because she can't sit for long periods. She can only follow online. But yes, she's been helping out a lot with like the announcements. And everyone else who took the donations, I think Sina took the donation. Also Leon did. So yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for everyone involved, for all of your hard work. Everyone who assisted, who came and attended and asked questions. Also those of you online, thank you very much for your interest and your participation. And maybe see you next term.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And lastly, of course, very important, let's make sure whatever positive potential we've accumulated together here, that it doesn't get destroyed by anger or ripens in some trivial kind of experience. Let's dedicate it in particular towards our own enlightenment, not just for our personal benefit, but most importantly for the benefit of every sentient being. But at the same time, may whatever positive potential we accumulated may also become a cause for our great lamas who embody the teachings, who teach us through their words, but also through their examples. So our lamas, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all other great realized beings, to have a very, very long life, to continue to guide us. And of course, may our positive contribution also help other living beings right now in ways in which it may reduce conflict and so forth. So on that basis, or with that in mind, let's recite the prayers. In the snow-encircled land, you are the source of benefit and bliss. Avalokiteshvara, Denzin Gyatso, please remain in life until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the precious view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Thank you very much.